Is anybody here a plastic surgeon? Okay, good. So I'll give that example. It's really nothing personal, but people get into all kinds of lines of business. And especially when we talk about something that's also medical, very few plastic surgeons say, I got into plastic surgery because of a life experience or because of, I have this passion to make the world more beautiful. Maybe they do say that, I don't know. But here, we're all here because something moved us. And we felt that the world's not good enough if we don't help more people build their families. We appreciated how it's so difficult to a segment of the population, several segments of the population, to build their lives. And so we said, everybody here has a personal story. Almost everybody I've seen in the industry, in the field, has a personal story or just deep passion. They wanted to do something more meaningful. They didn't just want to be lawyers. They didn't just want to be doctors. They wanted to do something very meaningful. And we all love those photos, the baby photos afterwards and stuff like that. And then in places like Europe especially, people are telling us that we're selling babies. That, this is something, that's not pure. That it's commercial. And in fact, there are two countries at least that say, oh, ours is not commercial. That's Canada and the UK, and others too. So, first of all, when we said let's talk about whether this field is getting even more commercial or whether we like it, how commercial it is, we're not talking about what people are talking about in Europe. We're not talking about the fact that if the surrogate gets any fee, any funds, that's what makes it commercial. That's not what we're talking about here. We believe that surrogates deserve compensation, or as we call it, restitution, for the disruption that this is causing to their lives, for the discomfort that this is causing to them, and for the risk that they're undertaking. So that's not what makes it commercial. And we're not going to talk about that tonight. We feel that surrogates have the right to figure out what's the monetary value of that, of how much they're not whole at the end of this. So we're putting that aside. We're talking about everything else. I mean, it might have to do with the way the compensation dynamics are going, but we're talking about the fact that, at least in the United States, almost every professional you need the help of is a private business. And even though they approach this with a very personal motivation, either to help people or because they even had that experience, they are then being faced with what people are faced in the marketplace. All kinds of dynamics. They might need more funds to finance this or that. They might need to make their business bigger, to compete in a certain way, to adapt to changing circumstances. And the question is, what are these dynamics causing this field, and do we like it? Now, we are absolutely not judging, condemning, pointing fingers at anything. We're talking about how we are, we're trying to see where we stand compared to where we were. 20, 30 years, people have been doing it for so long. And maybe the only remedy we'll have is just to talk about these things and be aware of it. Maybe we'll find other remedies. So we'll have a two-part discussion and a quick bathroom break between. We're going to start talking about what we think the problem, or what the ramification, is there a problem? And if so, in what ways? And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to bring out the topic and ask somebody to lead their comments about this, and other people can then chime in about the same topic. And then after the break, we're going to come back and talk about potentially what people are doing or what other developments are happening that might be in that regard, a remedy or some sort of a counter force to what we would perhaps identify as not so positive developments in the field. So that's kind of what we were talking about we want to do today. If we end up doing something a little different, that's fine too, as long as there are good interactions. So I'll start, and I'm not checking my emails. I have my cheat sheet here. So yeah, we'll start with you, Lisa. So give us a little context. So those of you, and please, Virginia, everybody, Adam, there are spots here. Come, we'll take a 2-minute, Frank. We'll take a few minutes, and you have a lot of interaction with people and agencies and clinics. And tell us what you have been potentially observing, about the dynamics in the last 4, 5, 6 years.
So, kind of my overall title, Director of Programming, but I work closely with our recipients of GPAS, specifically our Stage 2 program. So I work with the guys all the way throughout their journey, from the very beginning of planning their budget, and then kind of seeing how that budget actually unfolds and really what it means to them in a personal way of as this industry in a lot of ways is kind of growing up and maturing and changing. I see those direct impacts on intended parents and positive and negative ways. So in a lot of ways, as providers have come together and established standards and protocols for going through, that's really in support of the intended parents. Obviously, everybody involved as well, surrogates, egg donors, but kind of specifically talking to the intended parents, it really is a benefit for them. In other ways, as this industry has grown, it's really starting to impact potential parents in a negative way. And in the overwhelming way it's impacting them is just pricing them out of it. Costs are becoming so much higher. Even in the 4 years I've been with Men Having Babies, the average cost of a Stage 2 journey has gone from about $70,000 to $90,000 plus.
We're going to talk about tomorrow, but just so people are not confused here,
yeah.
When you say Stage 2, you mean minus all the pro bono services?
So we have amazing sponsors who have supported our program to donate what they're doing. So all of their services that they provide are donated to our recipients in Stage 2. There is still so many other costs that go into it. Surrogates compensation, egg donors compensation. We could be here all night if I named every single fee that goes into that amount. But just to give you that perspective of purely that outside all factors that have gone into it have really dramatically increased in just this past 4 years. Speaking from my own experience coming into the field a bit earlier as a gestational carrier, I can see that the costs have even grown since I first delivered, and I don't even know how old she is, 8 years ago. So we've really seen it, and it's not one thing. Like, I can't look at it and say, there, that's the reason, that's why it's so expensive, let's fix this one thing. It really comes into a lot of different things that have gone into it. Raising compensation, rising medical costs, the rising cost of doing business has just impacted that. And those same regulations that are really helpful and really beneficial to the community have also increased those costs of making sure everybody goes through all the proper steps and everything is handled in an appropriate way. That causes, costs to go up as well. And then you start to have more knowledge about it, more people interested in surrogacy, more people wanting to go through it, which is causing it in a very real sense, supply and demand. And so then you have those increasing compensation to help do that. And part of, I think, what we want to address is also where that line is between compensation increasing and when it becomes overall overly incentivizing for women to be surrogates, and what is that threshold. And we feel in a lot of ways we're really approaching that threshold where compensation levels are becoming not just what we talk about for disruption, for risk, and for discomfort during the pregnancy, but absolutely incentivizing women who otherwise wouldn't choose it to get into wanting to become a surrogate. But like I said, there's a lot of factors that go into it, and we're going to keep covering a bit more of what all kind of goes into those things that have created this increased commercialization and increased or changing dynamics of surrogacy.
I mean, if anybody wants to chime in general, but I will ask about specifics of that, each one of you. So, should we just continue? Okay, so Carrie, you've been in this field for a while, and you did carry yourself. You are no longer part of an agency, but you've seen a lot of that. So can you tell us what you might have, what dynamics have you observed, in particular with regards to, surrogate compensation, and how does it work? I mean, like, one day the base compensation is $20,000, 5 years later it's 25, and half an hour later it's 30. So how does that happen?
How it happens is a mystery, right? So really it's about, as Lisa mentioned, supply and demand. It's also about, kind of what the market will hold, the market will bear. And so for us, I owned an agency in Portland, Oregon, and we would consider ourselves a medium-sized agency. And we were very cognizant of the fact that there were always going to be agencies that offered their surrogates significantly more compensation than our agency. And we were okay with that because we were all surrogates ourselves, and we all had really strong feelings about compensation being crazy. And what crazy meant to us was, a first-time surrogate now, a typical first-time surrogate compensation would be in the range of $25,000 to $30,000, and we were seeing agencies offering $60,000 plus, up to $80,000 for first-time surrogates, or for any surrogate. And for us, that just felt not good on a lot of levels. And so we were very cognizant that we weren't going to be able to go up against those agencies dollar for dollar for advertising. I know we're going to talk about this, but a lot of those agencies had outside investors that we did not have. My agency was started with $1,000 from my savings account and built from there. And so for us, we made a very cognizant decision that we aren't going to be able to play with the big boys, and we don't want to, right? So we are this particular box of an agency, and these are our standards, and these are our ethics, and this is the market we're going to market to. People that want an individualized, personal, boutique experience, which I know is a little cliche these days, but for us, that's how we started. And particularly, my wife and I had our daughter through assisted reproduction and third-party donation, and I particularly wanted to market to gay and lesbian clientele. And so for us, it was just about making the decision we're not going to try to keep up with the big boys, and we're going to carve out a piece of the market that for us feels good on an ethical level for the surrogates, the parents, and us.
But you've observed what's happening, and Molly, you want to chime in as well, but it's not just the bad boys out there that have been, it's
Big
people,
boys.
why are, she caught on. But it's, what's happening? Do people, call it a marketplace, which once again is something that makes some of us uneasy, but what's happening? Do surrogates just, get one offer and then get another one? What's happening?
There's always been, and I assume always will be, far more parents than there are qualified surrogates. Our acceptance rate for surrogates when they applied with our agency, for someone to make it all the way from application to approval, was 5%. 95%, for whatever reason, were not approved. And there's many layers to that screening process where they could make it all the way to step 10, and then step 11, unfortunately, they're out. Right? So 5% acceptance rate for women who are already a small pool of women willing to do this. There's always going to be far more intended parents, even in a niche market like surrogacy, than there are surrogates. So that right there is your baseline. And then, yes, so as a surrogate, you constantly have people marketing to you. Once they know you're looking, then suddenly you've got inbox messages, and there are definitely agencies out there that once they know you've signed with an agency will say, well, okay, they turn it into this really gross business deal. What are they giving you? Okay, I'll top that by $10,000. And they'll just go up and up and up. And honestly, for us as an agency, and I'll only speak for my agency, those were the surrogates that accepted those were the ones we were okay to lose. Because if that's what's going to incentivize you is the extra $10,000, we're not the agency for you, right? So we have always had a waiting list. We always had a waiting time for parents. And that's just who we were, because we weren't going to compromise on that. So that did probably put us in a worse position business-wise, right? Maybe not the best business decision of what we're looking at as profit margin. But for us, we had already decided this is not the game we're going to be playing.
We'll get to you, John, in a minute, but Molly...
I just would love to hear at some point you talk about, with your agency experience, the misrepresentation in some of the advertising too. Like when they
Oh,
throw
yeah.
a number out there,
Right.
what's included, what's not, and how that looks, the optics of that.
Right.
You don't have to do that now, but I would love to hear your thoughts on that too.
Yeah.
And that's also something we addressed in the seed standards
Yeah.
that we've been working on, which we can talk about as this conversation
Yeah,
unfolds.
you can mention that.
I want to add, though, that it's really easy to focus on the commercialization and the competition within the industry, but we have to step back and realize that what's driving it is this demand from intended parents. Parents around the world in a lot of places don't know about surrogacy. Eventually they find out about it. I had a parent once tell me, when I heard that Elton John had a baby through this thing called surrogacy. So on the other side of the planet, they're hearing about it. And there are always going to be people that need assisted reproduction to have a baby. And there's more of them now because there are more people that are thinking that their relationship, their same-sex marriage and relationship is now valid and they can have a family and build a family that way. Single people now know about surrogacy. So there's an increasing demand from that side, and that's going to cause a lot of this increased demand within the industry here. And it just so happens that we happen to be the best country in the world to do this safely and ethically as compared to most other places. So there's a lot of people that are just drawn to the U.S. So I think we have to acknowledge that.
But I think Molly's question is valid. If one of you want to address that, it's sometimes it's not just that it's 25 versus 60. It's also the way things are being presented.
Right.
And go ahead.
I think that kind of talks to two ways. One is it's deceitful, right? In a lot of ways, if you're saying, lumping in every sort of reimbursement for lost wages or travel or anything like that and giving you that big number that surrogates see and are drawn into that, kind of from that perspective, from how it's being marketed, definitely is something that should be addressed. It's not forthcoming, it's not clear to a lot of people. And I think on the other side of that is there's so much information available to potential surrogates out there, but not a lot of education. So there's so many places, social media, probably up there with most where people get that information, and they see these numbers and they hear from other surrogates saying, I got, this compensation package or I got this, that, but they don't understand from the entire viewpoint of what that means. Not only how that fee structure breaks down, what it means for them, what it means for their family, but also what it means for that family that they're helping, to say, all right, well, they're offering me $10K more, I'm gonna go with them, because they're not really understanding what an impact that makes on the intended parents. And really, having information without that relevance or without that context really can just be leading people down one way without thinking of that whole picture and really understanding what that is.
So John, you've been in this, for many years, less intensively recently, perhaps even more the reason to have a perspective. When Carrie said that maybe these were not the women she wanted anyhow, and when Lisa says that, surrogates are out there and they might not have spent, a lot of time reflecting on it. They feel in their guts that they can help somebody that's nice. But what would bother you looking and seeing that today base compensation can sometimes be twice as much as it was when you helped us become parents? And what is it within, the interaction or the screening that's done with the surrogate that is provides warning signs if it's just about more and more money?
I don't believe that a surrogate who is motivated by money should be accepted. I'm lucky enough to be a part of an agency that has accepted between 1.8 and 2% of the surrogates who apply to us. And when I got started in surrogacy, I would say to people, the number one reason was money, the number two reason was they liked being pregnant, and the number three reason was a surprising event that occurred at the end of the journey where they were like, oh my God, I just did something really wonderful for somebody else. And I don't know whether it's our ability to attract really great surrogates and our successfulness or having 10 social workers review these things, but the surrogates that we're accepting are people whose, number one, is the motivation of feeling like Joan of Arc, where they have this vision at age 16 that they want to be a surrogate and to do this amazing thing for someone because they've known someone who's infertile, they have a gay brother or whatever it might be. And number two is they did like being pregnant. And, you know, their husband would like them to have money so that they can stay home with their kids. And so I feel like those attempts to get more money, to market for more money, is not attracting the right group of people. And if it does, it's not going to get you more. I found that in the past 4 years since I've been less involved with Circle, the number has not gone up in terms of our base compensation. I didn't find over the 25 years that I was involved in Surrogacy full-time that when I raised rates, that it helped us for more than about 2 months. Everybody else started raising rates and it just didn't do it. But I will say one thing, Ron, that I think is important. We're talking about the very thing you said we weren't going to talk about. And if you talk about what the world feels is what makes American surrogacy commercial, it is not about how much the agencies charge, or the doctors charge, or the lawyers charge. It's about the fact that you're paying a woman money to give up a child. And even if you pay
And why do we feel it's
overtime-
okay? Why do we feel it's okay?
I personally feel that we're underpaying these women hugely. This is $1 million thing. Nobody's given me
Can
a
I
greater
throw out
gift.
a math problem for all of you? 40 weeks, 7 days a week, 24 hours. That's 6,720 hours. I have it, it's here.
Right. It's like a buck an hour.
Yeah,
That's what these were gonna get.
But we're saying that they don't work for us.
Well,
This
but
is
you're
not
being
Walmart.
very careful because
Have
you're
you ever
avoiding a
carried
tax
child? I
issue.
just want to be clear on this.
Right.
I was rich.
It's like $6
It's,
an hour.
it's work. Your life is not your own. And they're graciously doing this. And I think to concentrate on surrogate compensation when it is one piece of a very large puzzle.
First of all, we will get to the other
is
issues,
not
but fair
necessarily
enough.
correct. And they're putting their life on the line. Surrogates have died, giving birth.
Yes.
So that's,
And received very little in life insurance, we know sometimes.
it depends on their age.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any difference how much.
But I
life
think
insurance
there are two underlying factors here that are important. Number one, when you have anytime money involved in any particular industry, especially in a fragmented industry like surrogacy, whether it's from a clinic perspective, an agency perspective, what happens is that there are shortcuts. And the overarching sort of goal of that conference in Cambridge was to protect the health of the surrogate. That was number one.
And the rights
So,
of the surrogate.
exactly, and the rights of the surrogates. So let's not forget that the health of the surrogate and the rights of the surrogate are of paramount importance from the very beginning, because they're the ones that make things happen. So when you have an infusion of money in an industry, then what ends up happening is ultra-competitive practices, accepting surrogates, putting their lives at risk potentially. Why? Because they may not, they don't fit the criteria potentially of being a surrogate. And so to me, there's an inherent conflict of interest within clinics, including ours, within agencies, when it comes to accepting surrogates. Compensation is one part of the story. The other part of the story is we have to be very careful to the overarching theme and goal is to protect the health of the surrogate. The other issue is, from a clinic perspective, is that, again, fertility practices are a very fragmented industry, and so what's happened lately is that there's been an infusion of money from private equity groups, from investment groups, and this has the potential to raise, again, the prices, to make the field more competitive, to accept surrogates who otherwise wouldn't be able to qualify from a medical perspective. And unless the leaders of the field, the people that are sitting right here and beyond, make sure that there are standards that are abided by, then this will become, again, continue to become a very
You took
competitive
us an
environment.
hour into the future, but
Well, we want to go in the future, plus the
but
debate.
so we'll get back to private equity and mergers, acquisitions, etc. in just a minute. We also want to talk about egg donors, and we'll speak about that in a bit. But just going back to, I think, something that's been said here, and attention that I think is healthy. On the one hand, the surrogates are making, are doing something amazing for us. None of us feel that there would be any way to really, pay back to that altruistic, for that altruistic deed they're doing for us, as well as what it entails. So we said, yes, there's restitution that they deserve because they're not just helping us, blind person cross the street. They're doing something that, as Virginia says, it's not easy. Having said that, we also don't feel that it is paid for time. We don't feel that they're just, cashier in Walmart. We don't feel that it's about how much time they spend. But I think what's been even in some of the comments here, the commentary was many times saying, the agency said, I'll pay you more. The agency doesn't pay the surrogates. The IPs, the intended parents, pay the surrogates. However, it's the aid. So what I want to maybe have one more round before we move beyond surrogates compensation is talk about, it's not the surrogates who initiate this, it's the agencies who initiate that. If all these agencies were saying $25,000 is the base compensation, it would have been fine. Surrogates wouldn't have come and say, I want more. So no,
Well, if I could buy my house for
Pardon?
what it cost 20 years ago, great, but that's not going to happen.
But that's
The reality
market.
is it's
So
not
that's
gonna-
market.
Yeah.
I remember the ASRM lawsuit.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was going to say.
Okay, let's talk about it.
Can't
Yeah.
price fix.
You can't price.
Okay, so you see, when we talk about price fixing, when we're talking about the housing market, we're talking about surrogate being rented or bought. We're talking about a product or service.
I was just scared of words.
But I'm saying that's what we're talking. We're talking about a marketplace. We're talking about supply and demand. However, if we're saying surrogates deserve restitution for the effort, the disruption it causes their life, the discomfort it causes them, and the risk they're undertaking, then what does that have to do with demand?
Before we go down the rabbit hole too far, I want to just say some things that are probably going to get lost in the conversation. That one of the bigger takeaways from Cambridge, which we at the ABA helped organize, was to examine how surrogacy is viewed around the world and the different models. And there are lots of countries that prohibit it, but people still seek out surrogacy services. So you've got a lot of places where it's just not allowed. And if we could work on improving that environment, then there'd be less demand here. The other thing that I think is important to recognize is that there's very little fertility coverage in insurance. If there were, that would change the dynamic quite a bit, or could. And so,
It's something we're striving to, but I think it's going to change.
If we're
this time.
thinking big picture, we need to think about those.
Absolutely.
I just want to throw
And
that out.
and there's a terrific bill in Illinois that just passed. There are several ones in the works. We'll talk about it during the conference. But going back to what you said, yes, it is those other countries and sometimes jurisdictions and law and legislators within the United States that look at this and say, this is wrong. It's like selling organs, it's like this is wrong. And their solution is to say, no compensation. You can still make money as lawyers, as agents, as doctors, but the surrogates, they're the ones who should give up their restitution there. That's the legislative solution of the restrictive and prohibitive countries. That's where they're going. Because I'll let you speak, Steve. They say, oh, look at beautiful Canada and beautiful UK. It's very altruistic there. And we know that it's just great compensation. They get the compensation, you just have to lie about it. Steve.
The countries that ban surrogacy and won't allow compensation are not philosophically that far off the mark with the United States, because the United States says a woman who gives birth and puts a child up for adoption cannot be paid for that child. And that is the model that the European countries are using, and you have to understand there's an underlying fundamental difference between U.S. jurisprudence in paternity and European jurisprudence. In every European country, their jurisprudence, the woman who gives birth, regardless of how that pregnancy came about, is the legal mother of that child. And if you give her money, she is selling her child in the eyes of those laws. And you're not going to change those countries till you change that fundamental discrepancy, and you're not going to.
There's another issue, though, which is that Ron has very carefully avoided paying for services rendered, which Rich has rightly pointed out, that that's really what we're doing here. And the reason he's avoided it is because there hasn't yet been a tax decision that says, like egg donors, surrogates have to pay it, because boom, we're going to get the numbers going up by 20, 30, 40% the moment that happens. But in my opinion, it has always been a payment for a service that has been rendered, and not for a rental of a womb or a giving away of a
But
child.
we think
And that's
it's a
how
third
I
thing.
differentiate.
But we think it's a third thing. We think it's not a rental and not a service. We think it is restitution. I always give the example, if you're stuck in a
That's the
big
argument.
hole and you
Doesn't
need
work.
somebody to come help you rescue out of that hole, they will climb down, they will risk their life, their family's gonna be worried about them, they might, bruise themselves or worse. They're gonna bring you out of that hole, and you're not gonna give them money for the rope. It's gonna be a joke. You're gonna feel that you wanna make them whole. You're gonna feel the desire to pay them back. Now, English is a certain language, there are other languages, we use different terms, but when you do that, you're not gonna feel like you're paying them for the service. You're gonna feel like you're paying for the gratitude, for the good deed they did to you. And if somebody came running, say, give me tax on this gratitude you just gave them for saving you out of the hole, you're gonna say, you're crazy. They didn't provide a service. So we feel that surrogates are doing a good deed. They deserve, if we just say thank you for the good deed, bye-bye, that would be ridiculous. Okay? But we feel that that's a good deed that deserves restitution. They need to be made whole. And we feel that they should not pay taxes for it. But you know what? Let's talk about egg donation, because I think that's going to maybe provide another angle to shed a light here on this topic, because I think there's some things that are clear there, but unfortunately there are also some bad legal precedents about that. So, Michael, when you had your practice, I remember that you always spoke about the merits of known egg donation. And besides, why is it even donation if we pay them? So talk to us about why you thought that known egg donation, and maybe explain in a sentence what you mean by that, was the thing to do or the direction of the future, and what might not always work that way today.
Well, just as you pointed out, we all come to this field with intensely personal perspectives, and we don't want to forget that egg donation and surrogacy is one of the most profoundly personal things that you can do. And so as we evolved the treatments, it became more and more clear to us that there was no room for shortcuts when we were choosing egg donors, and the advantages of known donation as opposed to anonymous donations or other egg banks or other ways to have more transactional relationships with the donor but not as personal, really didn't strive to accomplish what our donors were looking for, what our parents were looking for in most cases, and certainly for a gay man or couple, you're creating not just the child now, but you're creating a narrative forever. And to the extent that you can own and control and take pride in and repeat over time every step of the process that enabled you to personalize the selection of your egg donor, not only the better for you and the better for your child, but the better for your family. Because down the road, what we learned after 10 or 15 years is it's not a question of whether your child is going to want to know if you did an anonymous donation, more about their genetics. There are so many ways now where kids can test their DNA and find their donors anyway that it makes so little sense to I think probably any of us here, to start a journey with the door closed in an anonymous way. And good luck being the one to tell your 12-year-old, oh yeah, we didn't go down that open door approach because we thought it wasn't necessary, it was too much baggage. So the fact is, the donations, I think, that are approached today, with few exceptions, have to honor and embrace transparency and just the heavily relationship-oriented aspect of this process. And maybe that's something we need to teach people coming from other countries, or even people in our own field, as we hopefully set our own standards for how we want to practice and how we want to roll out services. Is that just because there are more transactional ways to go about it. You can go buy eggs now. You can literally have no communication or dynamic with the donor and have no future contact with her. And I'm not saying that's necessarily always bad, but I think as these external forces come into play, whenever we make a choice like that, we have to be very mindful of what are we giving up, and are we actually forgetting or turning our backs on some of the lessons that we have learned over the last 10 or 15 years. Anything that speaks to buying an egg is making eggs a commodity, and that's something we have to be very wary of. Again, just like surrogates, the compensation that donors get that are necessary. And to ignore that and just buy 5 eggs or buy 10 eggs and commoditize it in that way, I think fails to recognize all the lessons that we've learned over the last 20 years. And the last thing I'll say is the donors themselves. I mean, because again, we used to think we took care of intended parent. We would have people come in and, I want a baby, and this is what I want you to do. And it seemed like that was our only goal. We've learned, we've evolved that we have ethical responsibilities to not only the intended parents, but to the surrogates, to the safety and well-being of the donors, and to the children that result. And even our medical practices have changed so that we don't create multiple pregnancies anymore. We're not just giving a consumer what he says or she says they want. We're doing what's ethically safe and morally right for all the parties involved. So we don't want to forget how meaningful these donations, when handled in a personal and honored in the way they need to be, can be to the donors. We've just like surrogates say, the donors will say the most profound or one of the most meaningful things they've ever done is not getting paid for their eggs. It was the relationship that they formed from the minute they met the dad or the dads that they were going to donate to, through the process, before, after the egg retrieval, and now we're seeing for decades that follow, they're part of the family, and that's something that any donors that opt for known donations, which is, as I said, almost all of them now, is priceless. It's not about the money they receive, it's about the experience that we give them, and I'm wary to go down roads that dilute that process and make the eggs a commodity, again, something that like you just go by. You have to be really mindful of that.
Just a quick follow-up on that, Michael. I'm a big advocate for known egg donation because of keeping that door open, as you said, for intended parents to be, and for the children to be able to potentially one day, if they wish to, contact the egg donor. But is there room in that particular sort of philosophy for anonymous egg donation? In other words, what if there are donors, there are many donors that I've met over the course of 22, 23 years, they really feel in their hearts that they want to help someone, but they want to do it under sort of the rubric of anonymity. They feel great about the fact that they've helped someone out there, but still they want to keep their sort of anonymous status. Where is sort of, what do you think about?
Oh no, of course, I absolutely think there's an important place for anonymous donors, but I think that it's our job to counsel the intended parents that are choosing the donors to go down the path. That's not just in the immediate short. I can buy frozen eggs and it's cheaper, or I can use this donor and I can match with her right away. But that to think long term, that you're not just creating a child, a baby or a child, you're creating a family that has a story and a narrative.
I disagree intensely. There are
Well,
countries
because
all
your
over
view
the
is that intended parent-centric probably, because you want anonymous.
Well,
no,
without-
sorry, I have a lot to say. I'm trying to keep it as short as I possibly can. I use the fact that I have children through traditional surrogacy,
Right.
where the mother who carried them was also the mother they wanted.
Yeah.
They met, and those kids asked me questions about who was their biological father, and did we have a history of diabetes in our family when the other person's grandmother passed away from diabetes and related things. So I think it's hugely important for children, and there are many countries in the world that have banned anonymous donation completely. completely. I do not think there is a place for this. There are 19-year-old kids who are children of lesbians who are out on the front page of the New York Times on Father's Day talking about the fact that they can never find their father through some number somewhere. And I lost a sister at 52 to breast cancer, who at 45 discovered that she had the BRCA2 gene, who saved the life of my other sister who's still here for a 10 and 11-year-old because she found out early enough on that she had the BRCA2 gene to do something about it, and to take her breasts and to remove her ovaries. And I also feel that I know kids who were 10 and 11 and were adopted from China when they were put at a doorstep of a police station, and they can never know their parents, whose grades dropped from A's to D's in the 4th grade, who the only way they could come back and survive was by being able to go to that town and see where they grew up. So I actually think it's wrong to do it.
I'll let some more comments in a minute, but let me just by way of reminding us of the agenda for this weekend, we'll have a session about egg donation tomorrow.
Can I just say one more thing?
Just a second. So we will,
and I need a counterpoint.
And we will go down talking about, among other things, known versus anonymous from the standpoint of both the intended parents and the respective children. I would like, and I'll let more people comment, but I would like us to maybe focus back on the question is, anonymous or known, is it a donation or is it or buying those eggs?
No, you're always, so the reason egg donors have compensation is for the pain and suffering that they go through, multiple weeks of injections, injectable hormones, the abdominal bloating, the sensation, the pain afterwards, the egg retrieval, the anesthesia. That takes a lot, and actually takes a great deal of courage to do that. I just don't think we should close the doors to those who want to. There's lots of people looking for egg donors.
So anonymous or not?
I just don't think,
the reality
because
is,
I think now, from a medical perspective, I think the medical perspective argument has less prowess here, and the reason for that is because we do so much genetic screening and background checking and genetic counseling on egg donors that it's almost irrelevant who your egg donor was from a perspective of if you develop a disease. Not from an intended parent-centric perspective.
I just want to say something from a donor perspective, because this is about secrets and lies. You keep that secret from your family, your husband, your whatever, that you didn't tell them that you did a donation. You make it anonymous for whatever reason you want to. And that child at 15 or 12 or 9 or whatever it is goes on donor sibling registry and finds you and knocks on your door, and your life falls apart. That is something that everybody is open and honest about what's
do
going
no harm,
on.
and we don't want to cause any problem to anybody involved, including the families of the surrogates and egg donors.
Ron, yeah, thanks. There's a couple of things that are a lot of things. It's a really good discussion, compliments to the panel. But what Michael said resonated with me, that we're helping people to create their stories, their family stories. And for every person and every family, it's going to be a different story. There isn't any right way or wrong way to do this. Now, I agree with John, too, that the truth should be told, and every child has a right to know the truth. But, like, from my point of view, I have a son who was conceived by a sperm donor. He's 26, he never asks. We offer information, he never asks. I have an adopted son who comes from a very, difficult background, and I hope he doesn't ask, because I'm not really sure I want him to interact with the people that he came from. But he doesn't ask either. He's 21. So, but the thing is, you offer the information, and you try to support their coming into the world and what their stories are. And the other thing is about the surrogates. I think there's a conflict going on here, Ron, because you're saying something about if all the agencies would say the surrogate compensation is going to be $25,000, we'd be fine. But that takes away the ethics and the right of the surrogate.
I didn't say we were fine. I asked what would be different.
And I have the agency Worldwide Surrogacy, and the surrogates come to us not talking about money so much. They want to feel safe. They want to know, they do want to know if they're going to get their check on time. They want to know that there's a safe system in place to take care of them. They want to be supported. They want to have somebody on the other side of the phone or on the Zoom that they can reach that's going to contact them. And sure, they want to make some extra money. We can manage that by doing what's common in the industry. We know, I mean, I don't like the word industry either, but there isn't really a better word, but we all know. And the surrogates know too, because they're all on chat rooms and forums and this and that. They know what's to be expected. So I really think that it's a good conversation to have, but there isn't any one way or the other way. There isn't.
And after the break, we'll talk about what could be done differently. But just before we move on, I want to just refocus us on the question: why, if there was, and those of you who don't know, there was a lawsuit during which it was determined, there were two different actually cases. One in which a tax court determined that egg donation fees are taxable. And another case that didn't actually go all the way through, but caused the ASRM, the American Society of Reproductive Medicine, to step back what was previously a recommended or a set fee for egg donation to something that was a vague recommendation, because it was claimed, and potentially successfully, that it is price fixing. So if it is price fixing, why do we call it donation? If it's taxed, why do we still call it donation? What is the difference between buying eggs or renting the services of an egg donor, of an egg provider? Some people actually start calling them egg providers. In some legislation, in Europe they call them egg providers. We are egg donors call them egg providers. But what do we think? Is it still a donation, and why do we call it donation?
But the eggs are donated, the egg donors are compensated for the pain and suffering they're going through. Plus, there's precedence internationally for sort of what you claim to, what you say is price fixing. Meaning, like, for example, if you live in the United Kingdom, you can provide your eggs or donate your eggs, but there's a limit to how much compensation there is.
Which they don't consider a price.
Exactly, they don't consider price fixing.
Adam?
Exactly.
Yeah, so I have a question about, I mean, ultimately all this really comes down to balance, right? Compensation, representation, making sure everybody's being protected, but particularly back to anonymous donors. Let's play out a scenario where it became fully banned, right? It became illegal. We couldn't do it in this country. What would happen to the supply of donors? So you guys have worked with donors your whole
there's
career.
about
In my
20 to
experience, we have
30%.
always almost only had anonymous donors. We have, I would say 95, 97% of our donors are known, and we haven't had any trouble finding donors or other agencies that have that. It has changed dramatically. I think we were the very first agency that only had known donors, but I still had heterosexual couples who come in and want them to be anonymous.
I think you work but you said there wouldn't be a problem fighting.
I don't think there would be a problem. There were comments, though, when some of the countries first went to these rules, that the numbers of donors went down significantly. I heard, and Steve probably can answer better, that they went back up again. Because I think it's about how you explain it to people and what's going on in the world today. The fact that you can swab your cheek and find out who your donor siblings are, you can find out who your donor mother is too. And if that's the case, then it's not a reality anymore.
Well, the parents are the parents. The parents are not the egg donors or surrogates, right? That's one thing. The parents are the parents who, the minute the child is born, love them and are with them and support them. The only thing I want to sort of highlight is that if you do ban or completely discourage anonymous egg donation, then what happens is you will decrease, and you can sort of argue on the percentage, 10%, 20% of those donors who just want to give, they want to give their eggs, they want to be compensated, but they also want to help create a family out there, but they also want to remain anonymous.
So let's not get into the details, and we will tomorrow.
And it's perhaps, a different story.
Just because we're talking here about a spectrum of possibilities between known, identified, registered, and all those things, all the way to anonymous. So there are legal solutions that would allow you to not be completely anonymous and still not be a Thanksgiving guest every year. But so really, I want to move.
Those are contractual differences, not legal changes. It doesn't change who is a presumptive parent by genetic under the law, and we have vastly uniform sperm donor laws that protect men that are known sperm donors. We have very few egg donor laws that terminate that genetic presumption. And until you have the law come up to speed in protecting known egg donors, going wholesale into known egg donation is a legal crapshoot. And you have to consider that before you
And we need
into it.
and we need as a field, as a professional community, to try to change that.
It has to be changed.
And I agree with you. I agree with you. But so we're going to move on because I want to address two more issues before we're going to break, and then come back even if less than an hour to talk about some of the emerging potential solutions or trends that could help. But just MHB's position about egg donation is that the eggs are the eggs are not commodities. They're not being bought. It doesn't matter how many eggs are resulted from the egg donation. The egg donation should be compensated for the disruption, discomfort, and risk of the egg donor. And I think it crystallizes the discussion about surrogates because we all feel that there's something bad about buying human organs. And if we all agree that buying and trading with eggs is something that we find as a culture unacceptable, and for instance, when we have the conference in Taipei, we're not even allowed to mention anything about compensation for egg donors because they don't make the distinction between compensating the donation or buying eggs. We try to make that compensation here, but I think what we're trying to say here is that with the proliferation of egg banks, where people are not really compensating the egg donor, but rather getting 6 eggs per $15,000, then those lines are blurred. You can't even imagine, you can't even simulate in your mind a discussion of gratitude with the egg donor, even if you don't invite her for Thanksgiving. You really feel like you're buying something, you're buying tissue. So we feel that once again, maybe because of the size, maybe it's because of the scale, the numbers, the dynamics, whatever, it becomes a lot more like that than what you were describing as curation. But Rich, I want to talk about something we talked in one of the prep calls about the intermediaries and marketplaces and all these things. And another thing we try to avoid, deal with when we went to Taipei and into Asia is the fact that there are a lot of intermediaries that are coming into the field, and you've encountered some. I know we all did. So once again, I mean, would the child have a healthier baby, or everybody would be happier? If you look at the before and after without intermediaries and with intermediaries, what do these intermediaries do, and what could they sometimes do that we don't like so much?
Well, by
2 minutes.
By intermediaries, you're referring to what I would call facilitators, usually as a go-between between the parents and the field of professionals here.
Yeah.
So they say, I can tell you all about surrogacy and egg donation in the United States, I can lead you to the right professionals, and in that way they can be helpful in guiding them. However, one of the things that we've seen before is that sometimes there's a lack of transparency, because they will be the ones taking in all of the money from the clients, huge sums of money, and then they're the ones paying the providers. Parents don't know who's getting paid what or what's actually going on financially. So that's one of the potential huge negatives of that arrangement.
And as I said, I mentioned today because we felt that the more there is a cultural and a linguistic barrier or perceived barrier, that the more there is an opportunity for people to insert themselves in that way. And then there are all these chat rooms and discussion rooms, and there was one, I think, the ABA or the whatever, where there was discussion about all of a sudden a potential single, I think, Chinese guy that was working with multiple surrogates at the same time. They didn't even know about each other. And
that's where the lack of transparency comes in.
yeah. So there are consultants out there, concierge services, hand-holding, and that's, the more the merrier if people really feel that they need that. It's just that lack of transparency, and also, once again, going back to the issue of relationship. It doesn't have to be a family member, but if this is not done, if you objectify, the other side, then it no longer is what this field is, this potentially wonderful thing. And then last thing I want to talk about maybe before we break, Sadie mentioned before in brief, and out of order, about the issue of infusion of funds.
Right.
So this field is growing, there's more people, and then people need funds. And maybe we'll talk for another 6 minutes about that. And some people here also have experience on their personal lives. Also, the industry is maturing. Some people, get to the point where they want to retire, or they need to have a bigger practice. And, explain what it is that we've seen in that realm.
Yeah, I think at least there have been many industries now, including now fertility, because it's a lucrative business, and so what we've seen is now outside investors coming in, and in an industry where there's a great deal of fragmentation and lack of sort of scaling, the investors have come in and they have consolidated, for example, multiple fertility centers. And so one of the problems is that the sole focus of most of these particular endeavors is to maximize profit. And not only maximize profit, but also maximize profit within a short period of time. So anytime there's a significant infusion of money in any industry, it lends itself potentially to some issues related to ethics, ultra competitive landscapes. So I think we just have to be careful. The way we have to stay ahead of it, meaning that if we have guidelines and particular standards of practice within what we do, and what we do is we're creating families, we're building families for intended parents, for future parents. If we don't establish significant guidelines as leaders in the field, then what we'll do is we'll allow the market to guide this particular process. And the market will always guide the process towards maximizing profit. So you have to be careful. Again, you have to go back to the very root, and that is protecting the health of the surrogate, protecting the health of the egg donor, and making sure that you increase accessibility for intended parents and make this process more affordable. So each one of us, it's incumbent upon us, because we've profited from this particular, let's say call it industry to Vicky's point, it's incumbent upon us to give back. Now, we give back through GPAP, but I think we can do even more. I think we should do
So we'll talk about some of the solutions potentially later, but Michael, do you want to chime in a bit?
Sure. A few years ago when I was transitioning out of clinical practice, I had the opportunity to talk to multiple venture capitalists, practice management teams, equity partners, and I did a lot of listening and tried to assess the degree to which we were actually communicating about shared values. And what I could see clearly was that everyone agreed, as Said just said, this is a profitable industry that has not come close yet to maximizing the return on the investment. And there was a unanimity about that. But what I don't think I got the sense that too many of these suitors understood were some of the things that we've already said. That what makes a successful fertility practice, doctors, lawyers, all of us, is understanding a few things and protecting those things. That this is a profoundly personal experience where shortcuts can't be made. That it's our job to put our patients and their needs first, and that we exist to meet those needs in ways that have to be increasingly more cost effective, so that we never forget how expensive the process is already for intended parents, and whatever strategies are being integrated into the process are probably going to, are likely, as they said, to increase costs. So an example, my practice had a corporate social responsibility program for the duration of the practice every year. For 25 years, I think, we gave $100 for every baby that was born each year and divided it annually between 3 charities. A charity that supported women, a charity that supported children, and a global charity. And they changed every year. But it was $30,000 a year, year after year. And I can remember when I was asked what are the things that defines your practice's culture or your core values, that was one of them, because it gave us not only a benchmark to just do good, but it also gave us a connection to the community and something a little bit beyond what we were doing. Now, guess what? Everyone thought it was lovely, and oh, that's so nice. But the overwhelming communication to me was that this was not going to be a viable part of the practice moving forward. Other things, GPAP even, I didn't get as much pushback on that, but virtually anything that involved giving back or humanizing the practice, discounts for people who can't otherwise move forward, or refunds for people whose treatments had failed, were clearly all looked upon as contrary to the direction that most of these people would have wanted to take my practices. So I saw it as some warning signs for physicians here and elsewhere who are looking to scale their practices or take it to the next level or sell it and retire. That it's really, just like you said, it's our responsibility as an industry internally to define who we are, who we want to be, what we won't compromise on, what we must do to protect the best interest of everyone we serve. Again, the donors, the surrogates, the parents, and the babies. And if we don't do it, I think over time, the pressure will be that they're going to start to do it for us.
why we have so many guys coming here tomorrow, because it's so meaningful to get that education. If we held a similar conference for surrogates to get that education, I don't think we would be filling the chairs as we do.
It's not as if we can try.
And so, you know, for us, it's really finding a way of bringing that education and bringing that knowledge base to surrogates, because I do think that surrogates should be their own advocate. I think they should understand what they're getting into, understand the risk, understand what that means to the journey, and have the ability to say, this is what's right for me. Not just compensation, but making sure their life insurance policy is enough to cover their family should something terrible happen, and being aware of what those risks are, what all those parts are, so they can be an effective advocate for themselves, and even coming down to picking their lawyer and knowing, yes, I have a choice, and yes, I know here's where I can go find, and here's where I know that I'm getting a good agency, a good lawyer, good providers, because it is a lot of surrogates don't come into that knowledge. They haven't done that research. They don't have that level of investment, so it's a missing part of that whole package.
So we need to finish soon. If anybody has like a 15-30 second closing remarks they want to suggest. If not, we will continue talking over a drink or two. Anybody wants to chime in because we can spend another minute or two if you have any closing thoughts. Okay.
Steve says no.
Steve says no. But I do want. Go ahead. Yeah.
For the parents in the audience, it may sound like the industry's full of a bunch of crap. There's a lot of really good agencies, a lot of good providers, well-meaning providers who do a good job. Most of them are here at this conference. We're trying to, make it safe and for everyone and hopefully affordable in some way. But there's a lot of good people, and if you start with some of the licensed folks for recommendations, that's a good place to start. There's so much information out there, it can get overwhelming. So that's at least a way to start and start safe.
I also think you said to me, we're going to talk about the future later.
Okay,
but I do think that it's incumbent upon all of us to make this process more affordable, more accessible, and we all have to contribute. We have to all give back to it.
So you're lowering your profit margin?
I'm sorry?
You're lowering your profit margin?
That's something we can discuss over a drink. But,
all right.
But no, giving back...
By donating to Men Having Babies, yes.
Well, giving back means GPAP, giving back means, John has an idea about, having a place where those who find it difficult to afford the surrogacy journey can come to. And I think all of us have to contribute to it. So we have to give back.
So in that optimistic, on that optimistic note, we're going to conclude this. But I want to thank two of the sponsors of our evening here. So Alexis, why don't you come first and say just a couple words about law firm.
Just a couple.
Yeah. There's no mic.
Up there. Hi everybody. I have to tell you, this is like a real surreal moment for me that I am here at Men Having Babies and getting an opportunity to even say anything. In 2015, I was introduced to the organization. I met with Anthony. I fell in love with it. I volunteered for the GPAP grant committee, and I say that reviewing those applications each year is like the one thing I do during the workday that I don't feel like I'm neglecting work. It is the best part of my workday. It is the best part of feeling good about what I do. I'm also a parent through Surrogacy, and that's kind of what got me involved in the first place, but it's not what keeps me involved. And what keeps me involved is really what everybody up here is saying. It's the good parts, it's the community, it's the mentorship. I mean, John took time out of his busy schedule visiting New York to speak to me. Rich does regularly. Amy, I mean, everybody chips in, and it's an industry that there are scary parts to it, but there's beautiful parts to it. And if we all chip in and do this together, and we have places like Men Having Babies, who, we pounded the pavement together, right, to change the law. This is the stamp of approval. Be involved in a group like this, and trust the stamp of the colleagues who you can trust going forward. So thank you all for inviting me here. I just introduced my partner, Eric. He's here, another partner, Sarah's here too, but you can meet them over
And you
drinks.
can meet them at the expo, and go ahead. And we have an old partner that has been, well, the company that has been part of our Friday night before the conference for many years now, EMD Surrogates. So
I think
thank
so,
you
yes.
for that.
I'm sure many of you know Ruth Ceremi. She's sorry she couldn't be here this evening. So my name is Cheryl. I just want to say, if I look like I'm grinning from ear to ear, it's because, similar to what Alexis said, this is surreal, and I'm just so happy to be here in person with all of you. And a huge thank you to everyone who made this possible under these circumstances. So thank you for that. On behalf of EMD Serono, we just want to say thank you to the Men Having Babies organization for coordinating this wonderful event. From the inception of this organization, we have worked with men having babies in helping to create access and awareness for this special population. And we're so proud to be able to continue to support your mission, your outreach efforts, and obviously events such as this. I've been with EMD Serono for a little over 18 years now, and I have to say that I'm honestly so proud to work for a company that truly prioritizes patient access and feels so strongly about supporting groups such as Men Having Babies. We recognize the importance around education, needs around support and outreach, and we recognize that for gay men, there are headwinds when looking to start a family. So we're proud to be here to help support Men Having Babies, and we look forward to what I know will probably be a wildly successful 2.5 days. So thank you so much.
Thank you. So please join us for drinks and hors d'oeuvres or whatever else there's out there, and we will see you over the weekend. It's really just the beginning, and thank you for joining us.